Hi, welcome back to the ScalingFreedom.ai Show, where we cut through the AI noise without the hype to bring you actionable insights for business leaders. Now, today we're super excited to have Lisa Carmichael to the show, an organizational change expert who is deeply exploring how AI is transforming the workplace rather. Lisa's journey into AI wasn't planned. It began with a simple question, and that's how are professionals actually using AI? And this curiosity led her to nearly 40 in depth interviews. So we're super excited to dig in on that. And with over 2 decades of experience, including her time at Deloitte, Lisa brings a unique human centered lens to integrating AI into organizations. So, welcome to the show, Lisa. We're super excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a nerd on this topic, so love it.
So Lisa, again, excited to have you here. I think we
Yeah.
have that same kind of perspective. And to kind of kick things off, and we typically do it with all our guests because this is around AI. And we ask the question of like, what was your first AI wow moment where it really grabbed you and you're like, this is actually this is actually usable and this is quite impressive.
Yeah. So I have two personal, and then that kind of got me into the professional one. So the very first thing I did was with ChatGPT. My husband, Andy, is a huge Premier League soccer, English Premier League football fan, and particularly Manchester United. So, that name is probably going to be kind of familiar. So, what I thought would be fun to do to test it out and to show him what it was capable of is I asked ChatGPT to write a story about a fictional United player, a striker called Andy Carmichael. And it did. And it took it all the way from his time on the youth league, all the way through his retirement, and then unfortunately his death. But it was hilarious. It was so great. So that was number one. Number two is I had a friend who was having a big birthday, like 80th birthday coming up. And so I wrote her a song. I don't remember what platform I used, but I played with it and gave it some parameters, and it wrote this amazing song, which I then played at her surprise 80th birthday party. And everyone thought I wrote it. No, 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 no. AI. Um, so then I decided, okay, want to go the professional route too. How can I use it in my consulting work? And Jason, like you mentioned, I was doing research, and I used it to analyze the data, and that was expected. And I wanted to start publishing with it and saying, here's what I found, and here's why it's relevant to change management. So I decided also I didn't want to write about things that other people in the change in AI space were writing about. So I found, I don't know, 15 articles on it from reputable consulting firms, publications, AI thought leaders, and I put those into ChatGPT. And then I put my spreadsheet of research. I had over 300 different individual findings in different categories. And I put that in and I said, okay, dude, help me find the white space. Give me 15 or 12 different places I could write about. And it did. And it came back with something I found really interesting, which is so that was my professional wow moment. It came back with, hey, Lisa, you've written about keeping the human in the mix. So making sure that people are always interacting with AI and using AI as a tool and some other themes around that. And I was like, wow, it's white space. So I started writing about it. Lo and behold, and this is kind of validating, about 6 months later, that's now what almost every publication, all of the reputable companies, firms, thought leaders are writing about. And I thought, well, that's kinda cool. So, my wow continues with AI, but that was a big moment for me.
I love that because that's an actual tip
Yeah,
too that
yeah.
we can use. And what I love talking to people and doing this podcast is like everyone thinks about it differently and gets that. And we take away some of these little tips, which is so cool. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that with us.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
So, Lisa, I'm curious if you could, because of your track record in change management specifically, how is change management from an AI perspective different than traditional tech implementation in
Yeah,
enterprise space? And does it require a different playbook or perspective? Just curious to get your thoughts there.
it does in a certain way. So I think after having done this for 30 years, change management for 30 years, there's a toolkit for change. There's leadership alignment, there's communications, there's stakeholder engagement. And that is basically the thing. There's training. What has to change though, and what I think people are starting to realize is that the content and the context of those deliverables is very different. And the reason, two primary reasons. One of them is that AI occurs to most people as an existential threat. What that means is, how is it going to impact my job? Right? People are already starting to read in the media um, about the tech companies say, "Oh, we're going to a Duolingo. We're going to be AI forward." They lay off 20% of the workforce, and other organizations are doing that. And so I'm hearing that, and I'm someone in a company, and I hear the company's implementing AI, and it's like, wait, like what? So change has to address that. And then I think the other piece of it is, and the reason change is different, is companies for the most part aren't realizing ROI on their investment or ROI because there's a lot of factors that get in the way of adoption. And we can talk about those. I have, a couple in mind if you want to, but unless people adopt it, there's no return on investment. So it's like kind of chicken and the egg situation. And so I think those are two major reasons how change is different for this than it is for like large scale enterprise tech.
Yeah, the fear part is that you pointed out is a real thing. And it's so easy for humans to gravitate towards the unknown and, hey, how is this going to impact my job? Because it's
Yeah.
my personal livelihood. So when you're threatened, it's almost like your brain shuts off, and it doesn't matter what management methodology that you follow, even if it's best practice. If it's going to impact my fight or fight response, it might not even register, or I can't internalize that. So I'm happy that you're bringing this up because this is a real thing that every organization
Yeah.
face. It's like real, like everyone, like people are feeling this and they're experiencing this.
It is. And just to build on that a little bit, unfortunately, or fortunately for my business, I guess, but unfortunately for people and companies who might experience this, is there's an overwhelming number of organizations whose leaders don't understand that. So AI, it's fun. Like I got into it because I'm like, oh, what can it do? And, I want to learn more about it. And for me, it was a bright, shiny object. And I had to get smart about what rabbit holes I was going to go down versus where I was going to stay high level because I had a strategy around it. I know, have read about many organizations that don't have a strategy. And that causes more angst for people in the company. And what makes it worse is that leaders don't realize the implications of not having a strategy and the psychological safety implications that that has on their people. So it's all related, Jason. And I know you and I have talked about it and we kind of share this perspective. But I think it's worth talking about here so maybe the word gets out more. But it's a tough adoption situation.
I'm curious to dig into the insights and learnings from your research, because we start off the show by saying, hey, there's a lot of either a people resistance, there are organizations trying to adopt AI, but for whatever reason, it doesn't cross the finish line. When I'm
Mhm.
hearing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds awful and daunting. And also, yeah, it sounds like a lot of what we're hearing as well. So what is the solve? Like,
Mhm.
what's the path forward? What is your advice to founders, leaders, business owners, enterprise leaders? Where do we go with that context?
Yeah, so I'm gonna repeat a little bit of what I said because what I've been touching on in our conversation has been some of those things because I think they're really the most relevant for people to understand and be able to do something about. So the first solve for the difficulty is don't have it be a bright shiny object, have a strategy. And I can give some examples about that. So in a company, there's this one of my AI heroes is his name is Ethan Malik, and he's a Wharton professor and he runs a business in AI, and he's just great guy. If you haven't seen him before, look him up. Um,
I love his book.
he has a great oh yeah, I have it sitting right here. I haven't read it yet. Um, he has this great distinction about strategy, which is, are you after replacement or are you after augmentation? And a company or an individual, a solopreneur, right, like I am, or you all in an organization, like, what would you use AI for? And if it's replacement, are you using it to replace the low level part of people's jobs, which means they can elevate? Then they're going to need skills. They're going to need to know, what do I do with my extra time, right? So there's a gap there, a skills gap, an understanding gap. You want to fill that. If it's augmentation, how do people use AI as a thought partner? So, for example, for me, I rely on it heavily, heavily for research, for deep research. And it comes back with more information than I'll ever use. And it's more information, way more than I could ever get myself. But that's a choice that I've made based upon my needs. So I'd say understand your strategy and make sure people get it. Another thing, a way I like to think about it is that if you say your strategy out loud and people don't understand it, you got to go back to the drawing board because it's not really a strategy you can talk about strategic or in communication. So that's one. The other fix I think is to understand this. I found really interesting, but it's very common. And this I'll just back up and say I've also started doing a big research study, bigger than the interviews, of looking at published work on published work on the things that help and the things that get in the way of successful AI adoption in an organization. So some of what I'm talking about comes from that too. Like the replacement versus augmentation is an idea that I got from that. Another idea that I really found fascinating is that people in companies are using AI. They just are. And there's some astronomical people in the world are like 60% of them or more are using AI. In a company, you can say about 40% of office workers are using AI. Of those, half will cop to it. And understanding, right? It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay. Understanding why that's the case. And it's kind of back to Jason, what we were talking about is that, people don't want to say they're using it because if my boss finds out, will they think I'm cheating? If my boss finds out, will they be expecting me to have time? And how do I prove it? If my boss finds out, will they look at my work and say, okay, Lisa, what's your value add? Like if you're using ChatGPT to do your work, what are you doing? When actually, I'm doing a lot, right? It goes back to human in the mix and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of fear around admitting you're using it, even if your company is rolling it out.
How many leaders are actually using it themselves? Where I'm coming from it, my own personal experience is it has driven me to think differently the more I've used it. And it's forced me back to kind of a little bit of that use case, but the more I've done it, I'm starting to think about problems. I was thinking about execution in kind of an older framework with technology. Now it's kind of the more I spend time with it, it opens up to, oh, maybe I could think about this differently. And back to that leadership component, did you hear any of that, or were there any threads there within that cohort where it was like, yeah, they're actually using it, or they also having that patterns that I'm saying not admitting to use it because then it's like, well, what is my value, right? I'm curious.
Yeah. So taking that in reverse, I didn't find any leaders, any organizational leaders, and certainly not founders or entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are not admitting they're using it. The reverse of that, definitely true. And I can tell, so say doing I know there was I do what you could call a resistance audit, which is really like a readiness assessment for a certain type of technology. So if we're talking about AI, part of that is interviewing leaders. And part of the questions are, how are you using the technology? And there's situations where I can tell they're not using it by the way they answer the question. Or it's, I help my daughter write write a school paper or do an outline for a school paper, which isn't right. It's okay, but that's not really how we're thinking about it strategically. And there's another component to that, which is how are they using it? So what I'm listening for is a level of sophistication. And how I describe that is kind of how they're thinking about the tools they use. So if someone is using an LLM, like I was talking about, to do research, that's I would call a basic kind of point solution way of using AI. If they're stepping it up and using like multimodal AI, which say SVP of marketing, if they're implementing AI should be doing, right? Because there's opportunities to put video, voice, image generation, animation, all sorts of things into marketing content that used to be done on an Avid when I was working back in production way, way back when. I know it's evolved since then, but that it's the whole breakthrough technology. And then even taking it a step up into machine learning, is the organization, how are they using robotics, for example? And have they started to integrate robotics into supply chain or into manufacturing? Because that kind of data married in with, planning or with sales or things like that, you can automate. That shows a whole nother level of sophistication. So part of what I'm listening for is less of are you using it and more of how are you using it or how is your organization thinking about using it?
I love
Thank
the
you.
multimodal piece. That's so well put also.
Yeah, it's so great. I started playing around with Midjourney.
What images
Well,
were you creating?
so two things. I I redid my LinkedIn website, my personal website, to focus on change management for AI implementations, which, is really simple. And I thought, I need to have a new headshot. So, there you go, AI headshot, which anyone who looks at it can tell, but it still looks better than my old one. And then I thought, wait, I need a banner that looks like something. So it went in Midjourney and after several attempts and Microsoft Designer, I used them both, to come up with this pretty cool image that is now my banner on LinkedIn. And I included the prompt at the bottom on how I came up with the banner.
I love
So I did
that.
that for my LinkedIn. And then I know, isn't that kind of, I was like, oh, and again, rabbit hole, right? Nerd out, but it was really fun.
Lisa, I have a spicy question for you. It's something I've been noodling on. I haven't
No.
had the opportunity to ask anyone this
Something
question.
like that.
You're the perfect person to ask this question. Okay, so you probably have talked to a bunch of enterprise leaders, and you just kicked us off in the beginning of the show by saying, "Hey, there's this existential threat that employees feel threatened, right, with their job security, et cetera." And so, knowing that typically CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, for instance, they are responsible for shareholder value, right? And how do they strike the balance? Like, are they stuck between a rock and a hard place, knowing that, like, hey, if I bring in AI, likely that's going to increase my stock price or increase shareholder value potentially, right? Or, but then if I can't get adoption from my people, like we're not going to be able to get there either. And so it's like, what's the right messaging to employees to build that trust? Like, is it job security or is it something else? Like, how do they, what's your advice to leaders and what are
Yeah.
the ones that are adopting AI successfully? What are they doing?
So a couple things on that. I think the first is like, and Jason, you know this, is that there's a toolkit of change management activities that we go through. And I'd say again that the value in change management for AI is the content and the context. And I think for leaders, especially, how they get people to trust them is by being honest, probably more honest than they're comfortable with. And what I mean by that is being very clear with people about how AI links to the business strategy. So there's a story about why we're implementing AI and because here's what we want to accomplish with the company. And people probably know what the company's about, right? But here's where AI fits. And the piece that's really important beyond that is here's how you fit. Here's what the
Mhm.
opportunity is for you. So if you're a communicator, say you work in corporate communications function and your job is to write for executives, AI can come after your job, man. I mean, that's one of the pieces of low hanging fruit right now. Leaders need to think ahead about how they can talk about communication and maybe not ensure, but help people understand that they still have value to add. And that's where they're going to live in the company, right? Where they add value. And I think it's the work that leaders have to do, coached or not coached, but leaders have to do to be able to tell that full story. And that's what has people trust you. And if say they don't know yet whether augmentation, to use an example, augmentation or replacement is going to be their strategy, maybe some of both. To be honest about that too, right? Because people want to be able to go find another job if that's what they need to do.
Yeah,
That's how you thread the
that's
needle.
beautiful. That's beautiful. I think what you said about connecting the dots into how the team fits in
Yeah.
to the AI strategy, I think is the missing link, or at least that's how I heard what you shared.
Mhm.
Because often you could share a strategy, and people may not be a part of that
Right.
strategy. And if they don't see their own roles as integrated within the strategy, then that's how you that's how you lose adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you wanna look, and this gets to scaling freedom. I don't wanna tip my hat or yours, tip my hand, tip my hat. Anyway, is where do people have agency? That's where you wanna speak to them, because being able to have AI add freedom for you in your work, right, give you agency, you gotta know what your place is. Like, how can I use this tool so that it makes me better, so that it makes me more available to do other work in the company? And unless that message comes through loud and clear in a way that I know I can control the outcome, it's really easy to lose people, and I would predict that you will.
I love that. Yeah, that was awesome. I was just typing it
We
note.
could just leave it there. We could just leave it
Yeah,
right there.
that's like a mic drop right there. Oh, that's a quotable for sure.
I just typed that out. I was like, that is really eloquent. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we get to what we have a little bit fun part of the episode that we ask every every show, our guests every show the same kind of three questions. It gives a little insight. So little rapid fire questions. So I wanted to
Alright.
run through them with you. So the first one is what's one AI tool or resource you can't live without?
ChatGPT-03.
What?
Can I say a
Why?
second one?
You sure? Yeah, yeah. Curious why.
So ChatGPT-03, because it provides, for me, the right amount of nuance, and it reasons about what I ask it to do. And by the way, I love to watch it reason because it will, talk to you across the yes. Yes, I'm nodding. And so I can check its logic, and I can refine a prompt based upon what I see its logic is. And I just find it's really effective. So I use that for when I work with ChatGPT, I use O3 for, I'd say, 80-85% of the work I do. I wanna add Claude because Claude is great for writing. I write in a very particular way, and I want any help it gives me with drafting or writing to be in that way. So I've created a page and a half of a writing prompt, do this, don't do this, to specifically train the tool on how to do it. So I've got less work to do when I get the draft back.
Awesome. I love that tip. Next question. Your number one piece of advice for leaders who want to adopt AI. It could be personally, it could be within organizations, however.
Well, let me do personal because I think companies should have it, sorry, but they should kinda have it handled. So personally, you wanna have a use case, but it's in a different sort of way. So I'd say for me, I'll just use me as an example. Um, I found a bright shiny object that would help me prepare for meetings. And what it was supposed to do was go through, like, it would kick off 20 minutes or 30 minutes before I had a meeting. It would look at who I was meeting with, look at their LinkedIn profile, look at all through HubSpot at all the former conversations and meetings we'd had, what the notes were, go out to the internet, do some search, see if they, could find anything about that person or their organization, and create a little due diligence dossier for me, right? And email it to me. Took me 12 hours to set it up because it was really hard, but I thought, let's experiment. It did not deliver. So I got kind of sucked into something, let myself get sucked into something that I could have done, I do myself much more easily. So it's again, having a strategy. How am I going to use AI? What can I offload? That's something that it doesn't make any sense to offload, which I learned.
I like that. It's funny because, or it's not funny, but someone else that yeah, spoken to has written a book on AI and leadership and talks about this valley of despair. So you use AI a couple times, like you're describing. You want it to do something, you invest some time, and it doesn't give you the output. And a lot of people just walk away with it's going to take me longer to try to figure out here than to do it myself. And they just get stuck in this, not really thinking about how to use it. But if you have that shiny object, then you spend a little more time of it, and then you find the way to kind of get that gratification moment. And once you get that gratification moment, like, oh, okay. And that's, for me, that was very much like how to think about it differently, like getting there. And yet I'm not thinking about it necessarily the right way. I'm not breaking it apart. I'm just expecting it to know what to do, which is interesting.
I could build on that just real quick. When I first started using AI, GPT, and Claude to analyze the research I did, the transcripts that I did for my first bit of research, there I shouldn't maybe admit this, but there would be days when I would be typing in all caps using expletives at GPT because it wouldn't do what I wanted. I'm like, "Fine, I'm going over to Claude." Like it doesn't care, right? Or I'd slam my computer because in reality, I wasn't prompting it correctly, or I was letting the chat get too long, and so, the context window whatever the thing was, but I would just get so pissed off. So it is like, you get what you ask for in a way, and I've gotten better at asking for the right stuff.
As a quick aside, I don't know if you guys know this, like AI is almost trained to please. It's almost like if you express your frustration with AI and just share how disappointed you are with the results of the outputs, it's going to try to please you until it gets the results that you want. You could try this. It's really fascinating. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will for sure, because the other night, I slammed my laptop closed and I walked away.
Let it know how you're feeling.
Okay,
Mhm.
I will.
Yeah. It's like I just
I
slammed
will.
my laptop. I'm so disappointed in you.
Try again, try harder. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Last question. What does scaling freedom mean to you?
Yeah, so I kinda talked about that a little bit earlier when talking about how you get people in organizations to trust their leaders about the implementation. So 2 things. First of all, go ahead and giggle. I'd never heard the term before. So I went to my buddy Perplexity and I said, "Give me 5 definitions." They were all business. And then I said, "Okay, how might this apply personally?" And it gave me, I don't know, 5 different responses, and I read them, and I said, "Okay," and then I shut my laptop, not in anger, but to think about it. And I it was fascinating. It was like a little kinda coaching, mind-opening question that you guys asked me. So, what I came away with is it and I'll go back to using AI as an example because it kind of wraps a bow around this, is that using I can choose to use AI in a way that gives me agency. So, for example, in my work, I can use it to do the heavy lifting of research, gives me time back. How do I want to use that time? Do I want to go out in the garden, put my hands in the dirt? Do I want to call my sister? Right. But that's like a lot more freedom than I ever would have had before. And talking about it in my business, it's what direction do I want to take the business? And I have a lot of opportunity to use the tools to create what I want to create. Because my business around, change management for AI implementations. I made that up, you know, had some input from research, but I thought, what do I want to do with this? And that's the freedom that I have is to really to choose where I want to focus and what I want to do with my career and my life.
This has been a blast. We literally just I know we had some technical blips. While you were offline, I was just telling Moses, like, I'm really digging our conversation so far and just even some of these learnings. Like, we're going to start bringing
Yeah.
this into some of our client conversations. So, thank you. Where can people learn more about you, Lisa? Feel free to share any socials. Where's the best place people can find you?
Everything is on LinkedIn. So you find my profile, learn a little about me, and then in contact info, there's my email, and you can feel free to reach out, either message me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email.
That's a wrap on another ScalingFreedom.ai episode. If you enjoy the show, please make sure to hit subscribe. We're dropping new episodes every other week, bringing you conversations from experts that cut through the AI hype and focus on what really matters for AI adoption and outcomes for your business. Until next time, stay curious and go do more human things.